A house is going up on Oleander Street in the Holly Grove neighborhood of New Orleans, a home in the making.
Actually, this is my first time volunteering, and I'm enjoying the fellowship with everybody and just learning a lot.
The volunteer construction workers come from 2 local church congregations. One congregation is Trinity Episcopal, made up almost exclusively of white members.
I'm a carpenter on a daily basis, and this is something I can bring that I can contribute.
The other is Household of Faith, the majority of whose members are African American.
We come together, 2 churches from 2 different communities, but we come together in unison, and it's been an awesome experience.
The 2 congregations have been developing a relationship for more than a year now, and this Habitat for Humanity project is the most public and obvious display of their budding partnership.
It's not only right, but it feels right. And I'm just so glad I can do it with Henry.
So we started out just being prayer partners and holding up the concerns we have for our family and for our congregation. Then he called up and said, let's stop talking and start doing. I went, what? What? You want me to, what? And it's a thrill.
Household of Faith is a congregation almost a century and a half younger than Trinity. It has grown explosively under the leadership of Pastor Antoine Barrier. There are 3 different worship locations around New Orleans and about 5,000 congregation members.
I describe our congregation as being very energetic and people-oriented. That's why I believe, we just connected so well with Trinity.
However, there's more than a Habitat for Humanity project going on here.
Antoine and I went to lunch a little over a year ago. We both sat down and had a very open and frank conversation that said, yes, I would love to build this house. Let's use this ministry and this work together to also do some very real work of building bridges between our 2 churches.
Mitch Smith also hoped the build could be the latest chapter in a long, winding, bumpy but determined path that Trinity's congregation calls TURN, Trinity Undoing Racism Network.
Probably 20 years ago when the General Convention passed a resolution suggesting, actually mandating, anti-racism training for all of the clergy and leadership within the Episcopal Church, Trinity Church New Orleans took it seriously.
New Orleans, that unique city on the banks of the Mississippi River, had the largest population of free people of color of any city in the nation before the Civil War. It also thrived on the labor and the buying and selling of enslaved Africans and African Americans.
The economics of this city has always been involved with the slave trade and connections with New York, Rhode Island, Jamaica, in the Caribbean, as well as Africa. So we were part of that big triangle.
Trinity Episcopal Church on Jackson Avenue since the middle of the 19th century cannot escape that association.
The second rector here was Leonidas Polk, who was a Confederate general during the war. He was Bishop of Louisiana, then went and was killed during the Civil War. He himself was a slave owner, as well as his wife and his family.
Maybe we have an advantage because as a person who is a Southerner, you grow up knowing those stories. And who my ancestors were is not necessarily who I am. And so I can carry that with me, or I can choose to leave it.
The founders of this church either had or aspired to be slaveholders. This was a very wealthy, very influential church, and really didn't have to do anything.
Dr. Don Irwin's a congregation member and a physician notable enough to have a building named after him a few blocks from Trinity.
All day, every day, me and everybody that looks like me benefits from institutionalized racism. All the while, I get to say, I'm not guilty of that at all. I am just as good as gold. I have a lot of black friends, and I'm just a swell guy.
At St. Thomas Clinic, Dr. Irwin requires all interns to take anti-racism training, and he recommended the course for Trinity Church members.
The workshop that's offered is called Undoing Racism through People's Institute. It can be a real turnoff for some people, and they resist it, and then sometimes they will go back and take the workshop again, and something clicks. That's like my favorite kind of person, because they've had the doubts, but they've seen the light.
Until I finally realized that the continued holding of any kind of anger at that first presentation some 30 years ago, where those of us in the room who were white were like called out, if you will, for having white skin, wasn't going to help matters any, and it wasn't going to help me spiritually. I had to recognize that there was a part of me that needed to let go of that, and this program here at Trinity finally did that.
What Henry has done that I think has been very wise and very appropriate is that he has linked it to the baptismal covenant. You go down each component of the baptismal covenant and you say, how might race be impacting that?
A Trinity partnership called TEAP, Trinity Educational Enrichment Program for low-income kids, provided more perspective.
Being an African American and having certain experiences that I feel that I might be able to share some about my experiences so that it would help them to make decisions in the directions that Trinity is going.
Trinity's leadership board, the vestry, voted in October 2015 to mandate that the principles of undoing racism should be reflected in everything the church does, including Sunday school and adult education, wage equity for employees, and its community service programs, which will now place a greater emphasis on partnership.
Part of institutional racism in the Episcopal Church is sometimes we do mission and we expect everything to follow our schedule and our timeline. And when you say with, that's a two-way street.
Trinity leadership hopes the joint habitat build with Household of Faith will help the undoing racism process. It's a whole lot easier to engage in conversations across historic racial lines while swinging a hammer, putting shingles on a roof, painting window frames, or sharing lunch while sitting together on the ground. It's 12 noon at the worksite. Household of Faith members stop for a custom they honor several times a day, a group prayer via speakerphone.
I'm healed, healthy, whole, and strong. From the crown of my head to the soles of my feet.
Prayer is a word that comes up a lot when both congregations speak about their partnership. The turning point coming on a terrible Wednesday evening in June when 9 black members of the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, were shot to death by a young white man who visited the church for Bible study.
And Henry just called and said, Antoine, would you come and pray with me tomorrow? I said, I'm dropping everything. I'll be there for noon to pray with you. You know, and it just, you know, I know his heart. I know we can do things to work together. And at a time when we need to come together, we got to press it.
After 12 October workdays, the house on Oleander Street was finished. At the dedication, the new owner, who had invested her own sweat equity into the build, received the keys.
Her name is Ashley, and she actually grew up in New Orleans and has always lived here. And she has a son who I think is like 6 or 7.
We are all coming together as one to make somebody's dream come true. Isn't it a blessing?
The people of both congregations, Household of Faith and Trinity Episcopal, consider the finish of the habitat build as just the beginning of partnership.
The sky's the limit. In fact, that's not correct. There is no limit. And again, I'm excited about what Trinity is doing. I'm excited about this partnership. And there's some greater things that we're ready to do together.
The folks at Trinity Episcopal know that there is other work they need to do among themselves, facing history and taking on the task of undoing racism.
Just being willing to look at yourself as a white person in the mirror and acknowledge all of the things that come with that is an important step in talking about race and talking about relationships and understanding a different person's perspective.
This is important. We see how it's changed our lives to have an understanding of racism as a systemic evil within our society and within ourselves. And we know that this is what we're called to do here.